Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Welcome to our August speaker series with April. My name is Jess. I'm the community manager here at PairTree, and I am so excited to have April join us again tonight. April, you are starting to be a very familiar face around here. And I am so excited to talk about what it's like starting a new school year and how that can look different as an adoptee. April is an adult adoptee and adoption coach and the founder of Mercy and Healing, and she offers her speaking, coaching, and writing services to help foster and adoptive families navigate challenges, educate them, and really just empower them to be better parents in service to their kids. April, we are so excited to have you join us again tonight. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and kind of what led you to start Mercy and Healing?
Yes, thank you for having me again. I always love my time spent with you and whoever shows up. Yes, I am an adult adoptee. I was adopted out of foster care at the age of 2 with my sister. Found my biological father last year, which we'll have to do a whole thing on.
Yes.
So, and I also was a foster sister. So my adoptive parents continue to do foster care. They just stopped a couple years ago. And so I kind of got to see adoption and foster care from all different angles and aspects. So that was really helpful. But I specifically started Mercy and Healing. I noticed there was a big gap. It seemed to be adequate support, sometimes not great, but adequate support from saying you wanted to adopt to actually getting the child, custody of the child. But it seemed like once that adoption was finalized, all the supports kind of disappeared. And I knew firsthand from going through challenges that adoption affects an adoptee, an adoptive family, a birth family for the lifetime. Again, I said I found my birth father last year and I had all sorts of new feelings and experiences to work through. And so I really had a passion to come alongside adoptive parents, to cheer them on, to encourage them in some really tough situations. I had some really tough things growing up. I gave my parents the hardest time, and I just wanted to see adoptive parents have that support, to let them know this craziness is actually normal and it's not you. Or, you know what, maybe here are some resources that could help you better understand your child or better help bridge a connection to birth family or whatever they were experiencing at that moment in time. I also wanted to give an unfiltered view of adoption. I do a lot of pre-adoption counseling, so families that are just starting to consider adoption. And I think because it is a money-making industry, sometimes there are rainbows and butterflies, and that is the only thing that is shared, and the hard parts aren't shared. So then when the hard moments do come after adoption, when the obstacles come, when the really tough behavior comes, you're completely blindsided. And that has the potential to create more trauma, not only for that child, but for the whole entire family walking through it. And so I'm really passionate about giving an unfiltered, full curtain open view of adoption from the very beginning, so that families can make educated decisions, so that families can start becoming trauma informed from the moment they say, I want to adopt, because that creates a happier, healthier future. Again, not only for the adoptee down the road, but also for that family.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right. One, there's such a lack of support post-placement for every member of the constellation, but there's a big lack of real, honest, open views of adoption, experiences. A lot of it is kind of sunshine and rainbows. And so I love that you get to share your perspective and your experience with us. And this month, you wrote an incredible blog post for us about going back to school as an adoptee, and you shared some of your thoughts and feelings about starting a new school year. What was starting a new school year like for you growing up?
Yeah, so one of the moments that I still have ingrained in my brain, and I talk about this in my post, was just in kindergarten. My mom, like I said, they did foster care. I was usually one of 6 at the very least, normally about one of 11 in the home. And so I was dropped off at kindergarten, and, my parents didn't stay for anything. There I was, just this terrified little girl. And I remember looking over, and the girl sitting next to me was swinging her legs, looked so comfortable. And I just was in awe of how she could be so settled on her first day of kindergarten. And I think that queasy, just throat closing, heart stopping feeling would follow me for a while through my school journey. I think as I've healed and done the work needed, I have been able to tie it all back to that initial abandonment wound of adoption and the initial abandonment of my birth family, even though I was too young to remember. The body keeps the score. And just again, I remember feeling those feelings and thinking those thoughts of, I really wish my support person, my mom, was here. I really need someone here to tell me they're going to be back at the end of the school day, to tell me it's going to be okay, to tell me I'm safe, because I, of course, didn't have those tools as a kindergartner, and I couldn't even voice that's what I needed. But again, looking back, I can see how all of that was tied to that primal wound. And so again, every single year, as I started a new year, as I had a new teacher, I had new classmates, it was a similar experience, drop off and figure it out kind of deal. It was just really terrifying, and I would have really strong feelings. I really struggled, especially in high school, with getting physically sick a lot. And I was able to tie that back to those mental health issues of a lot of it being adoption related, of just being so confused and so tormented with the identity issues that adoptees often struggle with. But again, that initial abandonment wound of school didn't feel like a safe place. I didn't have my support, my family there often. They weren't in the classroom, they weren't present much. And so it just wasn't my favorite place to be. And so again, I remember those feelings even now. And because of the healing, I'm able to tie them back to that primal wound. Your elementary school kid will not be able to. And so that's why this is one of the things I'm passionate about, is just sharing from my perspective as an adult adoptee who has put in the work to really see, again, like those physical symptoms of, I was sick so much in high school, and being able now to tie those back to the mental health is so important, so we can support our adoptees better.
Yeah, absolutely. In your article that you wrote, you mentioned that adoptees, and you specifically, kind of craved control, and that kind of manifested specifically throughout the school year for you.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that, and what did that look like for you, and how might that look for other adoptees?
Yeah. So again, when I first started this journey, and I'm like, okay, what is going on? Let's start this healing process. That was one of the things that stuck out to me, of like, why do I have this need for control? And why, if I don't have control, it sends me into an anxious spiral? Well, I started reading peer-reviewed journal articles and academic literature, and come to find out, it is very common for adoptees to lack and crave that, or to crave that control because of the lack of control. And so I'll send this to you after, Jess, but there's a really great childwelfare.gov has some great handouts, and one of them is the impacts of adoption, and they specifically list control as one of those impacts. And so really it boils down to, we had absolutely no control of life-altering decisions for us. And that is true of anyone adopted, I would say, before the age of 8. Depending on the state, sometimes they give the adoptee some say after that age, sometimes they don't. But who we would end up with, and before that, even, a lot of, this is a whole nother subject, but a lot of times we blame ourselves of, could we have done something different so our birth family kept us? Again, that control. Could I have controlled being able to safely stay in my family of origin? And then I had no control over who I ended up with, whether I had siblings, whether I was able to maintain connection with birth family, birth siblings. And those, again, altered our life. And so when it comes to little things, so much was out of our control. So we just grasp onto whatever we can. And I've seen that in so many ways in my life. But when we're talking about school, I saw that in my grades, especially. That is something I could control. If I worked hard, if I did all the assignments, if I listened in class, I could get good grades. I could guarantee that that would happen. Again, with sports, if I worked hard enough, if I showed up to all the practices, I could hopefully guarantee that I would perform well. And so I think it was unhealthy. I had an unhealthy obsession with control in my grades growing up. And I just graduated with my bachelor's from Oregon State. And I still had to fight that of like, you're a mom and you're a wife. And darn it, if you're a day late on that paper, you're a day late on that paper. You have an A in the class. Give yourself some grace. But I had to say these things out loud to myself to combat that wanting of control. And so I think it really is. I've talked to other adoptees, and like I said, the academic literature points out that that's a very, very common struggle for adoptees.
Interesting. And it is okay to get a B. I'm not an adoptee, and I still, oldest daughter, had to fight that. And
absolutely.
Going back to school, it's a struggle to accept anything less than a perfect score.
Oh, yes.
And Lacey, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to either chime in or drop them in the chat.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but just always have comments, of course.
I love your commentary.
Yeah, I see a lot of the control, needing the control. And I guess I do have a question. Like, do you have suggestions on where you could give control to elementary age children so that they can fulfill that control bucket that is needed?
I think that's so important. And I love that you suggested that how do we give them control? Because oftentimes that's seen as such a negative thing. We need to be in control. We're the parents. And I do think it's crucial that adoptees are given control. So if they can decide what to wear, even if it doesn't match, let them decide. And I'm a mom too. And so I try to guide at the store, like what even comes into the house. And thankfully my kiddos wear uniforms, so that greatly diminishes that. But little things like that, what they eat for breakfast. And maybe that's, you give them 4 options or 3, depending on how old they are, and letting them choose that, letting them choose for their lunch. Hey, what do you want? You know, you have to have this and you have to have this, but why don't you choose that? What else goes in there? Just little things like that, especially in daily routines, I think are so huge. My kiddos are my bio kiddos, but I try to give them as much control as possible because I didn't have much control growing up. And I see that was detrimental. And so it just in the little things even. And then I dive into this a little bit in the article, but friendships I think are really, really important to help them facilitate and encourage. So even giving them control in that of my oldest daughter, all of her best friends are boys. Cool, awesome, let's do play dates. Like, not trying to control any of that. She does not want to wear dresses. She wants to wear her hat backwards and pants. Awesome. Like, you know, just trying to, again, that helps them with the identity of letting them figure out who they are without your influence. But yeah, that's a great question.
That is a great question. April, throughout the school year, is there or was there, you know, one specific project or assignment that you would look forward to the least in school as an adoptee?
Absolutely. And I can use stronger words than that. There were some that I dreaded that I knew were coming. I would hear, hey, in 6th grade, that's when you do the family tree assignment. And it was just tough. It was just tough. There were no options given of this is an optional assignment, or in addition to doing your adoptive family, you can try and figure out your family of origin. My adoptive parent knew at least who my bio mom's name was. I would have loved to include her, to bring two trees. Again, that control aspect. So I think those assignments are really important. And I sent Jess a resource, but a fellow adoptee who was also a teacher, Tina, she has an amazing resource that she's made up. How do you talk to teachers about these things? How do you bring that up? How do you word them? And so she literally has prompts on how you can talk to your teacher about things like this, because I give teachers the benefit of the doubt. Like, you wouldn't know, right? Like, you're just not even thinking, you're not intentionally trying to cause harm. But it's a touchy subject. How do you bring up that about your child? And so I think that's really important to kind of be proactive. If you know, hey, this is the year they do the family tree, or even if you don't, I think it's really important to have a conversation with that teacher. And this is something Tina gives a really great view on, is it's so important to not overshare, but you need to share enough so that teacher can adequately be prepared to support that child. And what does that look like? It's going to look different for every single child. And also, she has a printout that you can put in your kiddo's backpack, and it can say, like, Jimmy had a really rough night last night. Please handle him with care today. Just give him some extra time, extra love. You're not giving any details. You're not saying anything, because Tina makes a good point. Anything you say, there's no guarantee that it'll be kept confidential. So if you say Jimmy came from 3 foster homes and was abused in his last home, and he really struggles with food insecurity and likes to hoard food, that's way too much information. And so you can't guarantee that that's not going to get out to classmates or parents. And so walking that fine line. But yes, back to the assignment, I think it's good to be proactive of, hey, just want to let you know, like, Jimmy is adopted. And if there's any family tree, or let's bring a baby picture. Jimmy doesn't have those because he was in 3 foster homes. I got him at the age of 6. We don't have any pictures before 6. So please offer an alternative and present that with the assignment so my child doesn't feel othered. So, hey, you can bring any picture you want of yourself at any age. People want to bring baby pictures, awesome. But then Jimmy's not going to come up and say, okay, I'm the only one that doesn't have a baby picture. And then that starts those really hard questions of, why don't I have a baby picture? Why didn't anyone think to take a picture of me? It's just a picture, just the really hard tumble. And so I think, again, being proactive about those things at the beginning of the year, having a conversation with your teacher, just like you would a food allergy or any other thing that might affect your child. Religion, maybe you don't celebrate holidays. That's something that you would bring up. And I think previous trauma, being an adoptee, is something. And a lot of, again, this is something that I work on, just educating people about. Even if you adopted your child straight from the hospital, it will still affect that child. And that's still something I would mention to the teacher. And I would ask that be kept confidential. Hey, even the fact that Jimmy is adopted, can we just not share that with the class? Because I wanted to have control over who I shared that with. Depending on my age, elementary school, I was gung-ho. I wanted everyone to know. But as I started to get older into middle school and some of the mean questions started, that's not information I gave out anymore. And so, again, Tina's resource is awesome to just kind of walk you through, help you start to think of, what do I share and how do I share it?
And I will put that in like the recording notes. And when we send out the recording, I will also put that note in the email with the recording so that everyone can take a look at that and take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. You mentioned kind of one of, I think, a really important word that we need to talk about, especially in adoption and going back to school. What does othered mean, and what does that look like and feel like kind of for you as an adoptee?
Yeah, I think for me, so my adoptive parents adopted me when they were 50. So it was very obvious as soon as people saw my parents show up at school, it was very obvious I was not their biological child. And that is common for interracial adoptees, adoptees from a different country. And so we already are kind of like puckering ourselves for the questions, because as soon as they see our family, it's not something we can hide anymore. And so it just meant I was different. Why are your grandma and grandpa raising you? The questions weren't always meant as harmful. I mean, a lot of these kiddos are innocent and they want to know. And so I just felt like I didn't belong. I wasn't raised with my mom and dad. I didn't look like my mom and dad. Again, my parents did foster care, so there was always 2 or 3 babies in tow of different races with feeding tubes and all sorts of equipment attached to them. And so it just made me feel, again, othered, like I wasn't good enough, like I didn't belong. And so I really encourage, I think it's everyone's responsibility. And I do it again. I have 2 biological girls, but I read them books about adoption. I read them books about non-normal families. This nuclear family is becoming less and less common. And so I think it's our job as parents to expose our kiddos to these situations before they come upon them. And so read them adoption books of, so then they can start asking you those questions and you can help them reword them if they need to, of, you know, that could be hurtful. Like my kiddos have used the word real. Well, why didn't your real mom raise you? And I said, that word can really be hurtful because it makes me feel like I'm not real if my real mom didn't raise me. And then who is my adoptive mom? Because to me, that's my real mom, you know, just that certain. So I said, I know you don't mean that to be hurtful, but let's really use the term birth or biological mom. So you can kind of frame those so that when your kiddos get to school and they have peers that are different, they can intentionally include them and know how to say and what to say it. And of course, you're not always going to get it right. Your kiddos are going to hurt people just like you hurt people. So also teaching your kiddo the importance of apologizing, the importance of, I know you didn't mean to hurt them, but I think you hurt their feelings. Let's go make it right. I think that's really, really, really important because again, adoptees a lot of times we won't look like our families, and that'll just stick out like a sore thumb. And so really making sure that they feel safe in that school. And then I talk about this every single time I talk with you, but just creating that safe place for them so that when they do feel othered, it's probably going to happen. When they do feel less than, when a mean comment was said, they feel safe coming to you about that, and they feel confident that you'll do something about that you'll go talk to the teacher, or that you'll at least sit down with your child and say, I'm sorry. That's really hurtful, and then they shouldn't have done that.
Jess, I have a comment on that.
Yeah.
I think the point of feeling othered, I think if we focus on elementary age kids, my kids are 7 and 10, and specifically my 7-year-old, she just wants to fly under the radar. Like she does not want attention for anything. She doesn't want to be different. She doesn't want to be unique. Unfortunately, she is different and unique because she comes from a transracial family. And so as soon as her classmates see us, or they see a picture, you know, at the beginning of school, they want you to bring in a picture of your family sometimes. So sometimes it's not even the family tree. It's just the picture that your classmates are going to see, and they're going to have tons of questions about. Yeah. And so I think, like you said, April, sometimes there's really nothing you can do about it other than just providing them a safe space and letting them have the feelings they're having about being othered, and just saying, I'm sorry that you feel that way, and just sit with them, because you can't change it. There's nothing you can change but just to listen and accept, and not say, well, it's okay that you're this or that. Just accept that they're not okay with it and how they feel about it.
So important. Absolutely. Yeah. There will be situations that you, even if your child isn't adopted, that you just can't prevent. And I think that's so important. That's something that lacked for my upbringing, is having that place where I could just let it all out. And so I had to learn how to do that as an adult. And I learned there was a lot in there to let out because I hadn't done that. So I think that's such a good point, is you can't protect them, unfortunately, from it all, and really prioritizing creating that safe place is so important.
You know, you would think in 2023 that kind of adoption related bullying wouldn't be an issue anymore, because April, you're right, the mom and dad and white picket fence and 2.5 kids with a golden retriever isn't really the typical family makeup anymore. But I remember it was right before the pandemic. My little brother was getting bullied at school for being adopted. And I have never seen my parents be so enraged because he was getting bullied for something that was completely out of his control. And I have never felt that much rage toward an 8th grader in my entire life. But I was ready to get on a plane from Louisiana and come back to Michigan and show up at middle school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's why you moved back to Michigan.
Yes, exactly.
When I think also
the real reason.
The other thing is, even some of the kids are just curious.
Yeah.
But when you get these curious questions to a 7-year-old who still just wants to fly under the radar and doesn't want the questions, it's still others her, and she doesn't want to have to explain that. She just wants to blend in.
And I think verbally giving your child that permission of, you don't have to answer anything, and bringing that up with the teacher at the beginning of the year of, my child is adopted. It's not something that she's comfortable speaking or talking or telling people about. So I have encouraged her, if she gets a question she doesn't want to answer, that she will simply say, I don't want to answer that right now. And I want you to have your eyes out that if a student is following her and pestering her, that's not okay. And just because, again, I was never, something else I had to learn, I was never verbally given permission to not answer. And I had to learn how to make my no mean no. And we should be encouraging our kiddos, your no means no. That's enough. No means no. You don't have to explain yourself. No means no. And so I think that's another really important point.
My brother is 15 now, and he still is very much wants to fly under the radar. And I remember he got his citizenship last year. So it was like a whole ordeal. We went down to Detroit to the embassy for his kind of swearing in or citizenship ceremony. And my parents were, of course, super excited about it. And he had I think a U.S. history class or some type of history class. My parents were like, do you want to take your certificate? Do you want to take all of this stuff and show your class? And he was just, no, yeah. I don't. Like, I took the day off school. That was enough. But he very much wants to fly under the radar and doesn't really talk about anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think my sister is very similar. And I think, again, giving our kiddos and our adult adoptees permission, your story is your story, and you share as much or as little. And that's something that I really like to overemphasize when I share, that I am one adoptee with one story who is pretty open, but I am not speaking for all adoptees, and I am not setting an expectation of sharing for adoptees either, because again, I'm one adoptee, and there is such a wide range of wanting to share. And we get to choose what we share. You know, there are parts of my story that I will never share, and there are parts of my story that I'm very open about, and that's my control to be able to do those things.
I'm the exact same. I share pretty openly about my second placement and what that relationship looks like. And I don't really share a lot about my first daughter that I placed for adoption. And I don't know that I really ever will, but that's my story. That's my decision on what I get to share. And when I talk about being a birth mom, it's the exact same. I don't speak for all birth moms.
Absolutely.
Every single one of us, birth families, adoptive families, and adoptees, all of our stories are so completely different, and they're unique to us. April, kind of as we get ready to go back to school, or as parents are navigating those first weeks back, do you have any tips or suggestions? I know we've kind of touched on a couple of them, but do you have any tips or suggestions on how else adoptive parents can support their adoptees as we navigate the start of a new school year?
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I mentioned in my article that I think is really important is it's a long school day for kiddos. Again, whether they're bio, adopted, it is a long day with lots of commotion. And again, they often have little control. And so, again, that safe place when they come home, just focusing on meeting their needs. So, giving them a snack, giving them a comfort option, letting them take a quick rest if they need a quick rest, and just letting them know, hey, mommy's here if you need me. Even with my own girls, I really make sure I don't work when they come home. I'm not, the only thing I'm doing is making dinner, but even I try to make it just a simple dinner. And even as I'm making dinner, you can sit on the counter with me if you need to be close to me. I think really is so important. I remember growing up, my oldest sister would pick me up from school and she'd be like, how was your day? And she would just want to talk and jib jab. And I really was short a lot of the time. And I don't want to talk. Even now, just ask my husband. If something happens, nope, I'm good. I don't want to talk. Leave me alone. And then I'll come back in a couple hours and I will just need to share it all. And oh my goodness, this happened and it made me so upset. And then we had to do this. And so just creating that space for your child, realizing they may come home a hot mess. They may be so dysregulated, and giving them grace for that. It's really interesting. I read a book in one of my classes, Unequal Childhoods, totally unrelated to adoption, but it really explained kind of the rat race that we have kiddos in. They go to school and then they go to soccer and then they have basketball practice and they eat a snack in between. Maybe they have dinner when they get home, but then they have 2 hours of homework to do. They go to bed at midnight and wake up at 5 a.m. to do it all over again. And I think we're really going to start to see the toll of that as these kiddos are growing up. And is it really best for them that they are so nonstop? And it really compared different classes and different races, and how, lower classes, they actually spent much more time with their kiddos than the upper classes. And they, their uncle lived down the street and their grandma lived with them. And they were let free to go play. Their basketball practice was on the street with the basketball hoop. And not to say one is better or the other, but just it was really eye-opening to realize, again, the rat race that our kiddos are in. And so if your child has, for example, high sensory needs, they may not be able to handle a sport after school. Your family's going to look different. And you know what? You may have to make those sacrifices, but that's just reality. Can your child actually handle that sport? Can they handle that extracurricular? Maybe should we just focus on getting them regulated this year, getting them into therapy if that's something they need, or maybe that's just mom being present for a year every day after school, and we'll circle back to the sport next year. Or is there a way that we can do this maybe just 1 day a week instead of 5 days a week? And, I think, again, we're so focused on next step, getting these kids into college, getting them college scholarships. And it's like, let's just let these kids be kids and let's make sure we're meeting their needs as they have them and we're not rushing them to grow up. So that's my 10 cents from a human development and family sciences degree. But I think it is really important to consider. The Whole Brain Child is a really great book, and just considering, your child's not coming home and throwing a 2-hour tantrum because they hate you. It has nothing to do with you. Let's look at what actually they need. When's the last time they ate? When's the last time they went to the bathroom? Are they hot? Are they cold? Let's just meet these kiddos where they're at.
That's such good advice. And I don't have kids, but I now want to read that book because it sounds so interesting to me.
It's a big one, but it was required reading for my community and collaboration class. And so it just talked about, again, kiddos in school and how the community can collaborate to support kiddos. And it was just so interesting. And it really nailed down of like, I don't want to be that family running all over town because that's not what's best for my kiddos. Yeah, that's probably like my kiddo's 7. And I was just stressing about the other day of like, this is when they really start to get serious about sports, right? And then I had to remind myself, she is such an empathetic, hard feelings kiddo. She can't handle a serious sport right now. And so that's okay. And we're going to look different than all the other families on the block. And that's okay.
Completely unrelated to adoption, but now that you kind of talk about that, it was so funny because both my sister and I, who are 20 and 10 years older than my younger brother, we were involved in everything. We did every sport, every extracurricular activity, debate team, marching band. And my little brother, he does nothing. He's not in a club. He's not in band anymore, no sports. And I found myself a couple weeks ago asking my parents, like, aren't you going to make him do something, like some type of club or activity? And my dad was like, no, he doesn't want to. He's really into art. He comes home, he writes music, he does art. He doesn't want to do any extracurricular activities. And I was like, kind of in the back of my head, I was like, well, you made me. You made me do everything.
Yeah. That's actually incredibly refreshing to hear from you, April, and just to hear about your brother, because we do nothing. We do no sports, no after school activities. And my kids are 7 and 10, and they're getting to that age where we're probably the only family. And I was just at a mom's group last week, and I was having this discussion, and I was like, how are your kids doing these after school activities? Like, we're barely making it through the day at school, barely making it through homework. And every time I bring this up with a family, they'll say, well, we don't do much. We just do like MMA once a week and piano twice a week. And I'm like, and then the next thing I know, they've just said 5 days of I'm like, no, we do nothing. Like, we've tried a couple sports. They were very short seasons. They were fun while they lasted. But when I ask, hey, do you want to do this again? It's always a no. And I've had to come to accept, like you said, April, like, that's okay. Like, our family looks different, and our weekends are really, really free, and I get to sleep in on Saturdays. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And my daughter, she wanted to do soccer. And so I'm like, for sure, let's do soccer. But it's already at 7 years of age. It's 2 practices a week and a game every
at 7 o'clock at night.
I know. And I'm like, okay. But, you know, she wanted to do it. We'll see. Will she want to do it again? I don't know. And so that's also something that I struggle with, because I was on a year-round swim team. Oh my gosh, 2.5, 3-hour practices, 6 days a week. And I hated it. I begged to my parents, I hate this. I actually had a pretty emotionally and verbally abusive coach in high school. And I think that contributed to me getting sick a lot. I would just beg and beg and beg, please, you know, I want to do something, but like, let me try volleyball. Let me try track. And it just was like, nope, this is what we're doing. This is what fits for our family. Your sister's an awesome swimmer. And so we're just going to keep doing this. And finally, my senior year, I think my therapist talked to them and said, you know what, like, this is not what's best for her. And they finally let me do other things. They let me do water polo, but that gave me time. Then I could do powder puff high school football, which I really wanted to do. But if I swam year round, I couldn't do. So again, the control and letting your kiddos have that control of what do you want to do. And maybe that's nothing in this season, or maybe that is something that's going to require me to stretch myself a little bit, come up with help with rides. But giving them that control of what they want, and absolutely being okay if it's nothing, because even us as parents, I mean, we can't create a safe place for our kids if us ourselves are dysregulated. And so we have to make sure we're also prioritizing that of what do I need and how much can I handle in a day so I can show up the type of mom that my kids need me to be.
Yeah.
And you know what? Rest is productive.
Amen.
100%.
Even Jesus. Even Jesus rested.
That's right.
The elder millennial in me, I have to tell myself that rest is productive.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Well, does anyone have any more questions, comments? Anything else we missed, April, that you wanted to chat about?
You mentioned something, Lacey, and that sparked a thought in me, and now, of course, it's escaped. So
You'll think of it tonight in the shower.
I'll post it if I think of it. I'll post it on. I think Jess will share my Instagram, and I'll make a post about it.
Yeah, that was a great conversation. I appreciate your time. I know it's late for you, and that's time for your kiddos to be eating dinner and whatnot. But I just appreciate the conversation and just feeling less alone. That's always my goal, is just to feel less alone.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think a lot of times we focus, because there are a lot of adoptees of like, well, why don't you provide support for adoptees? Like, that seems like it makes a little more sense. But I have seen that in adoptive parents, just like the lack of care and love and like support and resources. And well, you chose this, so you can't complain. And you don't love your child if you're having a hard time. No, this is an extremely hard situation for everyone involved. And so that is something I wanted to mention for you, Jess. In the article that I was mentioning earlier about control, it shows that that's often a struggle for birth families, because goodness, you guys have such a lack of control in your situations most of the time. And so I think even for adoptive parents, there's a lack of control there too. And so again, if we can all just come together and support each other, the different parts of the constellation, and admit when we're wrong and apologize and ask for help, I think it would just make the community so much stronger. So thank you for being here and being willing to learn and listen and be open. I think it's such a good quality that not every adoptive parent has. And so me as an adoptee, thank you.
Yeah. And I think what happens is, as an adoptive parent, when you first start out, it's all about the weight and it's all about the match and it's all about a baby. But when baby grows up, it's so much different. And you don't realize the nuances in parenting an adoptee versus parenting a biological child. And you won't know that until you start doing it and you get into it. And that's when you. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that would be a great idea for another speaker series or support group, is control in adoption and also nature versus nurture.
Yeah. Yeah. And even just like, I think it can just be so intimidating, or it can be seen as, oh, that's a nature thing. Like, that's an issue. Like, just so many different things of, oh, you're, negatively talking about birth family and putting all the negative on them and all the positive is on the adoptive parent, or vice versa. And so how do we acknowledge the both? How do we honor the both? And how do we speak positively about it all?
That can be a problem for another day.
Yes.
So that way you can get to soccer practice.
And I can get to sleep.
Yes.
April, again, thank you so much for joining us. I love when we get to chat with you. You can find April over at mercyandhealing.com to book a one-on-one with her, which I highly recommend. Or you can find her on Instagram at Mercy and Healing.
Thank you so much for having me. We'll see you again soon.
Yes, absolutely. Did I just freeze again?